Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, coming to you from our studio at Tech Town in beautiful Midtown, Detroit, Michigan. I am Jer Stays, and across the table from me is...
Norris Howard, the Prince of Brightmo.
How does this Thursday, January 11th, find you?
It's really nice. It's getting a little colder, which I know a lot of people can't stand, but I'm looking forward to the arrival of actual winter. And we got a lot of actually positive stuff to talk about, but I think the first story is a bit weird.
It's a bit of a negative one. We're going to talk about some development, and then at the end of this, we're going to talk about a new pilot program connecting downtown Detroit and Ann Arbor. Let's jump into it. This is a report out of Crain's. I'll give you the headline. Target says deal for Detroit location is dead, but developer disagrees, which, by the way, early runner for one of the top headlines in Metro Detroit. Kudos to Kirk Pino and Crain's for that one, because how can the developer disagree?
Yeah, it's really weird. Essentially what this is about is the city-sized Target. If you've been to any other major city in the U.S., you've probably seen the smaller Targets. There's even one of them in Ann Arbor, right there on Liberty, I believe.
I visited one in Wicker Park. I actually took a bunch of video of it thinking, hey, maybe we'll get a city Target and I should show people who are unfamiliar, because in Metro Detroit, like, we're not used to this concept as much, but there's a Target just in the bottom of an apartment building in the middle of extremely dense Wicker Park, and it's got everything you basically need.
It is a Target, just with a lot less of the clothing retail.
Yeah.
But the thing about this is the Target that was proposed for right there on Mack and Woodward. That is a space that's supposed to have been developed. I mean, we've been talking about this Target for years. We've been talking about the whole development right there for years.
It's Detroit, and the thing I've learned over the years is that if something takes a really long time to happen, guess what? They don't have the money. I'm not saying that that's the case in this. I'm not officially saying that's the case, and I don't have reporting for it, but most times, 4 out of 5 times, if something isn't happening, they don't actually have the dollars together.
Yeah, the representative for Target has come out and said, listen, we're not putting that Target there. And they did not necessarily close the door to say we're never putting a Target in the city of Detroit. They're just saying we're not putting that one right there.
Because I think it would work. And I have a few ideas it would work. I think it could work up in Midtown near the college. Near Wayne State is an obvious selection, even closer than Mack and Woodward. Corktown could work. There's places this type of city Target could work. I don't think this kills the idea, but I do think that corner of Mack and Woodward has seen there's so much potential, but it's also seen some ups and downs lately.
Yeah, and they were citing the fact, and this is credit to Kirk Pino in the piece, is he made this connection talking about how the other small Targets across the country, especially on the West Coast, have been closing down because of retail fraud and theft. And I think about that corner in that area in particular, and that Starbucks that was right there on the corner of Mack and Woodward also closed, and cited not necessarily theft, but just cited the fact that they were homeless people who would often be in the store.
There's a lot of people dealing with mental challenges.
Yeah.
There are not enough services for them. Nowhere near enough services, especially since the removal of the service center that was there. A lot of these folks are staying in the same geographic area, but they don't have the services that they need. Like, some of them go to Detroit Medical Center, things like that. But there was talk that a new coffee shop was going to go in soon, but we are now a time later. I don't even remember. It's been more than a few months, and there's been no word on it.
There's been no movement on it. And, it's one of those things where I just think not just the money question, but I think also, unfortunately, the demographics question has arisen for Target. And I think they're looking at, this looks similar to the store we just closed in San Francisco. This looks similar to a lot of the stores that we've closed elsewhere. And I'm not necessarily caping for Target. Honestly, I'm going to just say this. I don't think retail fraud is that big of an issue. I think they're just getting whooped up by Amazon, and they don't want to say that openly. Because
that's your opinion, and
it is my opinion.
I understand that, because, the rest of the neighborhoods around there are continually getting stronger. There's that new hotel project right next to it. That's going to be a luxury hotel.
Yeah.
Right there on the plot of land next to it. So by the time this is done, I think it's a little bit of a different story than what they're saying will be the concerns.
And I think that's true. I think the weird part of this story is the developer side, because apparently this was supposed to be developed by City Club, who own a number of apartment complexes across Metro Detroit. And City Club basically came out and said, we have a legally binding agreement. Target can't pull out of this. Obviously, none of us have seen those documents. We don't have our hands on those documents, so we can't speak to the veracity of those statements. But it seems like a weird back and forth to say, we have an agreement, but Target say if we don't want to put our store there, we ain't putting our store
And how
there.
many times has it been said that, this thing's getting started and hasn't gotten started?
Many, especially in the city of Detroit.
And you look at a developer like Gilbert who has the dollars to get it done, and it gets done.
Yeah.
So it's not a personal thing. It's just having seen development speed in other cities, and even Stephen Ross kind of alluded to this, that the District Detroit University Center Michigan of Innovation deal took the longest of any deal he's ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we need to really work on in Metro Detroit, both Detroit and Metro Detroit, because if you want to get that momentum going, you got to get it. You got to get going.
Get done. And, we talked about it, late last year, is that the Hudson site was announced and they started working on it the year after it was announced.
Now, that was delayed over time.
It has, but the fact that work began very quickly and now a new skyscraper is there.
Canada wrote a check and we got a bridge coming together.
That's what I'm saying. So it's not like it can't be done. It's not like these things are impossible to do, but it does seem like they've come up on a money issue and Target is sick of waiting.
I'm going to be hopeful and say that opens the door for maybe something better.
I hope so. And I think a lot of this dense area down here in Midtown and downtown needs to be serviced by that kind of store. And there's plenty of places for it to go. So I think there's opportunity. And I think, City Club and the rest of this development team has slipped a move by not getting, whether it be the paperwork or the money in order to start on this site, because now they've lost what was supposed to be a cornerstone of that development.
Which bridges to something that you and I went and covered on Wednesday, was this event at the old Jefferson School. Mayor Mike Duggan talked about 1,100 new apartments coming online in various forms. That's the kind of thing that helps encourage retailers like that, because that density for something like a city Target, it matters. And let's get a little bit into that, because we went to this project. It's at Selden in the Lodge. This school has been kind of empty for a while. It's being redeveloped by Invest Detroit, which is going to put their headquarters there. There's going to be offices, co-working, that kind of stuff. This is along with 4 other projects that are splitting up $14.5 million in state funding from the Michigan Economic Growth Corporation. It's interesting to see this development kind of like, hey, we're doing a little development update, and here's not just this project, which, by the way, small detail point, but kudos on the windows. The black trimmed windows look so much better than the white trimmed windows.
I agree. I think what they're doing at the Jefferson School looks great already. Obviously, it's early days on this development, but Invest Detroit is supposed to be headquartered in the Jefferson building along with another consortium of small businesses and startups and whatnot. You could almost call it like a tech town south, roughly, if we're going to say, just to give you a conceptualization of what the intent is.
And different than WeWork, because I think a lot of people have WeWork in their head as far as business incubators, but when it comes to actually getting it done, there's so many more services that wrap around that.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's going to be obviously more involvement from the city itself, so it will have that support from a municipal point of view. But these developments look cool, and the thing that I like the most about it is outside of roughly the Fisher 21 loss, which is going to be that massive plot of land over there by 94 and 75, that huge eyesore of a complex. All these developments look doable. Mm-hmm. They look doable. The scale is very much so in the realm of reality. And I think that's something that we need to be thinking about a little bit more in the city of Detroit, is that everything doesn't have to be a skyscraper, because everybody's not Dan Gilbert and everybody's not billionaire.
But it also, we need to think about that middle density, because one of the things that came up in the hearings for the project near the studio here for the Henry Ford campus, turning that into apartments and things like that, there was some community pushback saying we should put single family houses there, and that would have looked ridiculous.
Yeah, it would look really
stupid. It would
stupid.
Look ridiculous between the Pistons Performance Center and the Henry Ford. It's like that idea of Detroit's a pretty big place. Different neighborhoods require different things. Let's walk through some of these developments. Some of them we've talked about on the show before. The Broadway Lofts, which I know that's one we've talked about with Devin right downtown. That street's kind of been bedeviling redevelopment for a while, right across from Punch Bowl, the old Punch Bowl.
So
yeah.
Again, but because of that block right there, that stretch of Broadway, I think that was also why it was difficult for Punch Bowl, in addition to the pandemic, to stay open, because there's kind of
some of their own things.
Yeah, that's true. It's just difficult over there. It's just not a lot of foot traffic, not a lot going on. And that block specifically was mentioned by Mayor Duggan as a target for redevelopment. So this is a very positive development as well.
You got the giant Fisher 21 lofts.
Yep.
The Arthur Murray building and the Deco, which are over on the east side, I believe over on Warren.
Yep, East Warren.
Very cool projects happening in that area of town. I have a little special place in my heart because I've done CB Patrol there back when I was like 18, 19 years old.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Going around. I used to be a regular Angels Night Patroller.
Really?
I did it for like 15 years.
That's awesome.
I got my Dennis Archer whistle somewhere.
That's awesome. Did you have to give back the yellow light or did you keep it?
Oh, I gave
Or
it.
the
I
orange
was
light?
responsible and gave back
You didn't keep it?
Somebody else needed the light. I was following the thing. I guess maybe you know what? If anyone's got a Angels Night Patrol light, we'll put it in the studio.
We should. We should. If anybody out there still has their Angels Night Patrol light and you don't care to keep it anymore, we would love to put it in the studio as a key piece of Detroit memorabilia.
Well, and then, of course, the Jefferson Intermediate School. All these projects, I mean, it's an important amount of money. It will help some of these smaller scale projects go forward because, like the Arthur Murray, that is a $14.9 million project, almost $15 million bucks, 25,000 square feet. That's going to help them. That's a significant percentage of what they're going to do getting this money. And there's so much activity happening over there. And here's the thing, and maybe you can talk to this a bit. I know you're a West Sider.
I'm very much so a West Sider.
But some people are like, oh, I really see what East English Village and all that stuff can be and where it's going. And then there's also like this reputation from back in the day that just people can't shake, that it's possible to turn those areas around. Like it's weird how mentally people think differently about downtown and then other select areas of the city when like East English Village, yes, there are of course issues everywhere and different blocks are different things. But like I'd live in East English Village tomorrow.
I think the thing about the East Side, because this is what we're really talking about. I think the thing about the East Side is that there is the reputation, but also we forget that the West Side is just a newer part of the city. So it still retains a lot of its density. A lot of those buildings are still, looking pretty good.
That shows up in the council district. Like we were talking about this offline, the change in council districts, that the East Side's going to see some major shifts. Well, the West Side, not as much.
Not as much because
you're seeing a population drain outside of those build-up areas.
Exactly. And you talk about, the 3 or 4 most stable neighborhoods in the entire city of Detroit. Guess what? I think all but one of them are on the West Side. So they're beyond just even the reputation. There's even the population loss and a lot of other things that I think contribute to some of these factors. And I think that sucks. I don't care that I'm from the West Side. It's still the city of Detroit. I want the whole city to do well. I think that also plays into some of the development conversations to see, well, listen, this neighborhood is seeing growth. This neighborhood is not. This is where we should focus our energy.
So do you want to know what I was doing on Tuesday night, Norris?
What was that?
I was hanging out at a RTA meeting, learning more about this direct bus line.
Riveting.
Yeah, Pivot. It's a pilot program. $2.5 million in federal funds are going to pay for this thing, which is going to result in up to 16 daily trips between downtown Detroit and Metro Airport. It's going to get launched ahead of the draft. This is a 1-year pilot program to try to connect these things a little bit better. It's going to be provided by Michigan Flyer, which was the only bidder for this thing. If you remember, like Michigan Flyer, I think it's like they also provide some Greyhound service and things like that. The idea being direct service, the cost is going to be capped at $15. I think there's going to be some other options, which compared to taking an Uber or a Lyft or a Metro car is cheap.
Yeah.
I am excited about this. It was interesting to see how much debate there was about exactly where the stop should be.
Yeah.
And then to see hoteliers be like, hey, Greektown Casino was like, hey, let's put the stop over by us. Or
that's right.
Because there's so much of this traffic. It was interesting also to see people going, this is a great first step, but I hope this is successful because I'd like to see a lot more that feels more like transit.
See, I like that energy because to me, what this feels like is, oh my God, the draft is coming next year. And what we don't want is a bunch of people blasting us on social media about how poor our transit is because they're coming from all over the country. It's still going to happen, everybody. But the thing about it is, this is what this smells of. I think it's still a net positive. Don't get me wrong.
It's a necessary step forward.
It's a necessary step forward. It is a net positive. I am not going to begrudge it from that point of view. But at the same time, it is also very much so a panic. We got to get this done somehow kind of situation.
I know it was in process for a while. And I will say this. Sometimes an event helps focus the mind.
I agree.
Sometimes you need a deadline because most people I've met, whether they make money or not, if you don't put a deadline on it, they don't get it done.
Here's what I will say. After the draft is over and after all the football fans have left, we will see what happens to this thing. They say, oh, it's a test pilot.
A year long.
It's a year-long test thing. In 2025, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Because this is where I get angry with the regional transit conversation, is that we get these great beta programs. We get these great beta
D2A2,
ideas.
the ATU
Exactly.
bus, which more people should know about.
Yeah, we get these beta programs where it's like, these are good ideas in theory and we'll just try them out. And then the tryout becomes the final.
I see what you're saying.
We talk about the Q line. The Q line, we all know the original plan for the Q line, right?
Wasn't it supposed to be 8 Mile?
Yeah, at least it actually was supposed to be the Pontiac. But we all know how that ended up, and now the beta of
People
what
Mover.
we got, right? The People Mover, the beta of downtown,
Because that was supposed to be the loop that connected these things. It was not. Right. I've answered some questions offline about this. People don't realize that it was part of a bigger plan.
It was part of a bigger plan. That was a beta, and it never went anything past that. And that's what I'm frustrated with.
So you're hoping
I
this
feel
is the
like,
fire starter.
Yes, I hope it's the fire starter, but history has shown me that we will now just have a smart bus that goes from Greektown Casino or wherever back down to the airport. And is that a net positive? Sure. But is that a transit solution? No.
To be clear, a lot of the bus stop talk was more around Grand Circus Park and near the Rosa Parks Transit. Like, they still haven't figured out where the bus stop is.
Wherever it may
let's
end
just
up.
make sure I want to make sure, because I know somebody in the comments is going to get at me.
Okay.
So for me, when I posted about this on social media, my DMs just started blowing up and going, I want my rail. I want my rail. Where's my rail? Where's my rail? And it makes me wonder, like, it's about bigger vision. I think people want to see that, but there is a huge disconnect in funding and how much that stuff all takes, especially building it in modern times versus when, like, I've been to the New York Transit Museum. Things were different when you built subways and rail in like the turn of the century, where there was the cut and cover and just putting the street over the top. It was a very different time as far as labor and environmentals and all that other stuff, which I think really changes some of our things.
Absolutely. I agree that that is going to be just a tougher thing to do, but we gotta have a will to do it. And I think it's really important, especially considering, in my opinion, what the viewpoint potentially of the big three and where they seem to be headed. Transit is going to be very important for every major metropolitan area in the world. And it seems like everywhere else in the world understands this issue, but here.
It also seems like this is an opportunity, if this can work, to take some lift off of SMART, because a number of people actually messaged me about issues with the 261 SMART, the bus that goes out there. People who actually tried to use it like the day before and had issues with it being late and all of that. So I think if the RTA can serve a role in taking these big lifts off of it and say, we're going to do a test pilot with downtown. Maybe we'll do a test pilot with Royal Oak or something. Because the airport is such a crucial connection point.
Absolutely.
In this region. I'm with you. I really hope that this is only the beginning, and I want to see it be so much more. Even if it was better bus rapid transit or whatever, I just want to see it keep evolving.
I want to be wrong about this. That's just how I feel. I want to be wrong. So, RTA and everybody else, please prove me wrong about this, but it just feels like after the draft is over and next year in 2025, when everybody's supposed to sit down and reassess this, everybody's going to say, it did what it was supposed to do. It's good enough.
I also hope the funding situation is different, because this money is coming from the carbon reduction program from the federal government. It just comes down to this. We've talked about transit a million times, but we have to be willing to pay for it.
Yep.
And that's your gap. And how do we solve that, I think, has to be part of, especially when we talk about the new legislative session. We're coming into the Detroit Policy Conference. Things are starting to warm back up. We need to really have those conversations about how is this going to come together.
And also, for the listeners and voters out there, if transit is important to you, guess what you got to do? You got to vote. You got to put these people feet to the flames, because, again, we all know turnout in local elections ain't what it should be. So if everybody is sitting around moaning about this, find the candidates that are pro-transit, or if there are no candidates who are pro-transit
in your area,
maybe you need to find one and prop those people up. Because right now, I'm not necessarily sure if there is a candidate I would say is super pro-transit in Metro Detroit.
I feel like there are. I mean, we talked about the transit caucus and some things like that, but they want to hear from people.
That's what I mean. Let's see that move forward, and then hopefully we could get some movement on it.
Norris Howard, always good to talk to you.
It's always great to be here, Jared.
There's other places people can find you.
That's right. You can find me also at Football Furioso for all those soccer fans out there. You can find that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that good stuff. We will be doing video towards the end of the month, so you'll be able to find us on YouTube as well, but not yet. But yeah, new episode out yesterday, actually.
Awesome. Well, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our members at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Feedback, as always, 313-789-3211 or dailydetroit@gmail.com. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.